Previously on Learn All of the Nodes.
In our last episode, we were looking at how to do a put route in our application, which would be a challenge given that browsers only do get and post. And now the conclusion. We have here our awesome adventure game. We can go to the adventures, we can make an adventure, but let's say we didn't like the outcome and we want to one-up save state and emulators. We want to just go in and directly change the outcome. How would we do that? The first thing that we're going to do is put a form in place. This time, the submit button is labeled a little bit more accurately for what we're trying to do. So go ahead and save that and restart our server. And now when we come back to the app, we can load another adventure, and here we get this nice way to try to edit. But what's going to happen when we click that? Well, if we go back to the code, we can see that this form is just going to post, and it's going to post to adventures. And we know from our routes that if we post to adventures, we just end up back at the create adventure route. So let's test that out. Oh boy, there's really no difference there. How do we get it to recognize that this is something different? Well, following along with the RESTful way of doing things, one convention to fake this out is to use a hidden input. And we'll give that the name of underscore method. It's a common convention. And the value that we'll give it is put. So now when we submit this value, we would have access to something called underscore method, which would have a value of put. Now, as of right this second, if we were to submit this form, we wouldn't very easily have access to the fact that we had a hidden field called underscore method with a value of put. We would have to actually parse out the incoming post request ourselves. We've already seen one middleware that helps with that, and that was back when we first showed how to make a file upload less painful. And the way we did that was using the Express body parser middleware. Now, what this middleware does for us in this case, and in the previous case as well, is it takes the post request and turns its body into something that we can see using the rec.body object here, or property rather. So let's restart our server, and we'll head back to the browser, run our little cheat bit there, and when we come back, we can see that our request body has underscore method put, which is exactly what we'd expect. Now, if we want to respond differently, then we just put in a simple rec.body.method equals put, right? I mean, that seems like a great way to handle it. We can just start putting branches all over the place. If you guess that that's the wrong way to handle the problem, you guessed correctly. Turns out there's a middleware for us that already handles this, and it is the lovely method override middleware, which provides faux HTTP method support. So heading back to our code, we just want to make sure we plug that in, and we follow the same sort of pattern here. Now, one change we do need to make real quick is that when you are editing something, you're generally editing a specific instance of it. So we're going to pretend that we have an adventure ID 42. That one sounds pretty important. We haven't dealt with databases yet, so we're just pretending we did. And if you recall from earlier, we actually already put a route in place that deals with adventures / some ID. And so we are going to restart our server, head back to our browser, and we need to reload the page to get that ID in there. And then we click our cheat and look at that, we hit the put method. Well, that was certainly awesome, but that's not the end of what we can do here. If we go back to the homepage of our game that we're making here, it just seems a little bit drab, right? We could probably do something to make this game more exciting. Why not put an image in there? We have an image. We have it in this public images directory. It sounds pretty exciting, sword and shield. So to get that into our markup, of course, we would just come over here, and maybe right after the H1, we can put in, let's go ahead and put that in a paragraph, just so that we get a nice line break after it. Source equals images, sword, and shield, PNG. Great. Reload the server, come back to our browser, reload the page, and Uh-oh, it's a broken image. Why is that? If we look at our image tag, we're going after the path /images /sword and shield PNG. And if we come down to our routes, there is no route that defines that. Now, you might be tempted to think we could go ahead and put one in. Kind of like that, and just for argument's sake, we're going to inline that. You could do something like that. And if we define valid as it would get the file to the user, then, well, minus the comment issue there, this would get the job done. But what then if you have another image? Would you duplicate that? I don't think you'd really want to. That would get out of hand really, really fast. Believe it or not, there's a middleware for this too. Let's go ahead and get rid of these bad lines. Head back up to the top and get poised to add the new middleware. First, let's go have a look at it. It is the static middleware, a static file server with a given root path. And this is pure connect here, of course. If we wanted to see that in Express, it would look like this. Here in the Express documentation at app.use, there happens to be an example of using static. We'll go ahead and grab that real fast. Come back over to our code and put this in. A quick word on what we're doing here. This double underscore dirname variable is something that Node provides to us. When you use that in any given file, it resolves to the directory that the file is located in. So in our case, this is going to be the full path right on down to episode 005. And if we look in that directory, of course, we have this public folder. So we're saying that whole directory plus public. Now what that's going to do is whenever a request comes in, it's going to consider that request in the context of this directory here. So when we are looking at images, sword and shield, the middleware is going to notice that we have images and that inside of images we have sword and shield and pick it up. Now before we run off and see what's happening here, we should probably go ahead and actually close this paragraph. That was an oversight from earlier. But let's go ahead and restart our server and head back to our browser and then reload our page. And there's this sweet graphic, and already this is looking like a really serious adventure game. What if we wanted to have cookies in our application? Could we do that? Turns out we can. Back at the Express documentation in the middleware section, we can see a whole list of different middlewares that we can use. There's basic auth, body parser we've already seen, compress, cookie parser, cookie session. In fact, any middleware that Connect supplies, because Express sits on top of Connect, we can use any of these in our application. And these are just the ones that are predefined by Express and Connect. Now the way that we've been putting the middleware into our application so far, using this app.use in this manner, basically these middlewares are going to be invoked on every single request. And for what they do, that's exactly what we want to have happen. We are going to get to a point where we have certain middlewares that we want run on some routes and some that we don't. So we're going to actually look at that next time. But let's take a look real quick conceptually at what middleware is doing for us. So we have here an awesome diagram. This is the cloud. User requests come from the cloud, obviously. And this is a representation of the code in our server. And these are two actions that we need to make sure that the user is logged in for them. And what we see is that in both cases we have some function that will see if the user is logged in or not, but we have to remember to call it in both cases. Otherwise, we have to send the user back into the login. So if the request comes to this handler, we have to put this code in here. And if the request comes to this handler, we have to do the same thing. That seems like a bunch of duplication. And this is exactly what middleware is solving for us. Let's see what this would look like with a good middleware in place. This time, when the request comes in, we have this middleware function that gets called first. It has the exact same check to see if we're logged in. And if we are, it goes to the next, which could be another middleware. It might be our route handler. In Express, the middlewares are chained together one after the other until the request is handled or some error is handled. And we're going to look at that next time, so just kind of skip over that bit right now. If we're not logged in, we of course go to where we should to log in. Now what this does is look at our handlers now. They're a whole lot simpler. They just have to do what they're supposed to do. They don't have to worry about making sure that a user is actually logged in, because by the time it gets to them, that has already been taken care of, which means that the logic then is not polluted by some other concern. And because this logic doesn't have to worry about checking to see if the user's logged in, you don't have to remember to keep coding it in there, which makes your app easier to follow, and easier to follow, that means fewer bugs, that means fewer security holes. Now, there definitely are some middlewares that you don't want to run on every single route, and in our conceptual drawing, the one of someone being logged in, you really don't want to enforce that on every single route. For example, on your homepage, that's where people go to sign up in the first place. If you require that they be signed in to view the homepage, right, no one's ever going to be able to sign up for your app. Now, we're out of time for this episode, but in the next one, we are going to look at how to put middlewares at only certain routes. And also we're going to look at how to write our own and why we would want to write our own, what sorts of things we could include that would help us with that. So stay tuned, and until next time, happy coding. If you found this episode useful, or if it saved you some time, would you consider spreading the word by either sharing it on Facebook, tweeting it, or even just linking to it from elsewhere on the interwebs? Thanks a bunch.